The suspect portraits in the Madeleine McCann case were seen by millions, but there's something that almost no one noticed. What the witnesses described could turn the case upside down, and the details behind these images hide more than they appear. If you want to go beyond the obvious and uncover the secrets that could change everything about criminal cases like Madeleine McCann's, subscribe to the channel now and activate the notification bell. Here we unravel every clue, every hidden detail, to reveal the truth that few dare to investigate. The composite sketches of the Madeleine McCann case have become one of the most discussed and controversial elements of the investigation. When we look at them, it's impossible not to wonder, do they truly represent what the witnesses described at the time? Or do they conceal details that could have changed the course of everything? Today we will delve into the behind the scenes of these drawings, exploring what was said, what was omitted, and why these images raise so many doubts. It all started with witness reports claiming to have seen suspicious individuals near the complex where Madeleine disappeared. In one of the most well-known testimonies, a witness described a man carrying something in his arms, possibly a child, walking quickly toward an isolated area. The description was turned into a composite sketch that soon spread across newspapers worldwide. But here's the point. Did the sketch truly capture what was said? Now think with me. When you look at these drawings, do they seem accurate? Or do they leave room for interpretation? This is a doubt that many experts have raised over the years. One of the most famous sketches in the case shows a man with a generic appearance, which led to numerous reports of individuals who weren't even at the location. And I know what you might be thinking. How can something so generic be useful in such a crucial investigation? The situation becomes even more complex when we analyze the methods used to create these sketches. At the time, the witnesses were under immense emotional pressure, and studies show that stress can significantly affect visual memory. Additionally, the artists rely on the witness's ability to describe details clearly, something that, in the heat of the moment, is virtually impossible. And this raises another question. Are these sketches closer to conceptual art than concrete evidence? But what really caught my attention was a detail that few noticed. When comparing the sketches of two different suspects released at different times, there's an impressive similarity between the facial features. Both have characteristics that could easily be confused as the same individual. This makes me think, were these sketches being adjusted to fit a pre-existing narrative? Now pay attention to this. One of the witnesses, years later, stated that the drawing released to the public was not faithful to the description she had provided. She mentioned that she tried to insist on some details she considered important, such as height and face shape, but these points were altered or discarded in the final process. Why did this happen? Communication failure, or a deliberate attempt to shape the case according to other evidence? And here's the most shocking of all. Some criminology experts suggest that the sketches may have been manipulated to divert attention from real suspects. This theory gains strength when we analyze the early years of the case, marked by conflicts between the Portuguese police and British investigators. Each side seemed to work with a different agenda, resulting in several leads being discarded, and the sketches might have been part of this problem. This leads us to the main question. To what extent can we trust what was presented to the public? Were these sketches an essential resource for the investigation, or just another element that contributed to confusing and diverting the focus? Trust in the sketches released in the Madeleine McCann case begins to crumble when we analyze the contradictions between what the witnesses reported and what was presented to the public. In one of the most intriguing cases, a key witness described a man with unkempt hair, pale skin, and an almost furtive expression. However, the sketch released to the public showed generic features, a clean face without any distinctive characteristics. This raises the inevitable question, was the drawing altered to be less specific? Now pay attention to this. Over the years, at least 4 different versions of sketches were released to describe the suspect man. In 2 of these versions, the differences are so stark that it seems unlikely both came from the same account. For example, in one, the man has short hair and a young appearance, while in the other, he appears with more mature features and a medium-length haircut. How did these inconsistencies deliberately trying to confuse the public and the investigations? The most shocking part is that in 2013, a leaked confidential document revealed that one of the most famous sketches, the one showing 2 men with similar profiles, was based on a testimony considered unreliable by the police themselves. This detail was never officially disclosed. The witness in question reported seeing strange figures days before the disappearance, but her description changed at different times. Nevertheless, the sketch was widely released, leading to reports of innocent people and diverting attention from other more consistent lines of investigation. And here comes the most intriguing part. Upon reviewing the archives, experts noticed a curious pattern. The dates when the sketches were released to the public coincided with moments of intense media pressure or new criticisms of the investigation's progress. It was as if the drawings were used to redirect attention, creating a convenient narrative to alleviate pressure on the investigators. Another point that makes this story even more complex is that, in 2009, a renowned forensic analyst was called to review the drawings. He pointed out that certain elements of the sketches seemed too generic to be a coincidence, as if they followed a mold. According to him, this might have been done intentionally to make identification more difficult or to hinder establishing a real connection with already known suspects. But what caught my attention the most was a revelation made by a former Scotland Yard investigator. In an interview, he stated that during a critical phase of the case, some witnesses were discouraged from providing additional information that contradicted the original descriptions. If this is true, we are looking at a case where crucial information may have been withheld to protect a specific narrative, or perhaps to protect someone. Finally, when we put all these elements side by side, the suspect sketch transforms from an essential tool into an even greater enigma. Was it drawn to help find Madeleine, or to cover up something that no one should discover? And more importantly, what else might be hidden in the shadows of this story? This photo, or rather these conflicting versions, are not just images. They are a reflection of how an investigation can be shaped by interests, errors, and even manipulations. What remains to be seen now is whether these pieces that once confused the case can, in some way, help us understand what really happened. And believe me, there's still more to be discovered. The sketches in the Madeleine McCann case are like puzzle pieces that never quite fit together. From the beginning, they played a central role in the investigation and the search for answers. But instead of bringing clarity, they ended up raising even more doubts. Now, by revisiting every detail, we begin to notice something that might have gone unnoticed. The sketches not only fail to clarify the mystery, but also seem to be part of it. To start, it's essential to understand how these drawings were created. In Madeleine's case, many sketches emerged from witness accounts who were under great emotional stress. In such situations, memory can become somewhat confused, and the descriptions provided end up being influenced not only by what was seen, but also by the emotions of the moment. This leads us to the first question. Do the portrayed faces reflect reality, or a mix of fragmented memories and assumptions? An example of this is the famous sketch of a man described as furtive, seen carrying something that appeared to be a child on the night of the disappearance. The original witness provided basic details about height, posture, and clothing, but the face was difficult to describe accurately. When the drawing was released, it seemed too generic. And that's the problem. Generic sketches can lead to unfounded suspicions and, worse, divert focus from more promising investigations. However, some believe that this choice may have been intentional. Here comes the first theory. What if the sketches were not as faithful to the witness's descriptions by the investigator's choice? This possibility arises when we analyze how they faced pressure, whether from the media or public opinion. A new sketch was released. Instead of bringing concrete progress, they often generated a flood of reports, few or none of which were useful. Could this have been a tactic to give the impression of progress, diverting attention from internal failures in the investigation? Another intriguing possibility is that these drawings were adjusted to align with other theories of the time. For example, in 2009, a second sketch of a man was released. It had some similarities to the first, but the facial details were different enough to raise suspicions. When compared side by side, it seemed like both could be the same person, but with some deliberate changes in features. Were these alterations the result of new information, or an attempt to shape the investigation's narrative? Now let's move to an even more controversial point. During the analysis of witness testimonies, a disconcerting pattern emerges. Several of them describe men who seemed to be watching the complex in the days leading up to the disappearance. However, none of these reports appear to have generated composite sketches at the time. It was only much later, when the media was pressuring for answers, that the drawings began to appear. This raises the question, why were these descriptions initially ignored? And more importantly, what could this mean for the case? The answer may lie in another often overlooked detail: the involvement of different police forces and agencies in the investigation. From the beginning, there was a conflict between the Portuguese police and British investigators, with each side operating independently and often in disagreement. It's possible that these sketches, created at different times by different teams, reflect this division, each side trying to present their own version of the ideal suspect. And what about the media? Its influence cannot be ignored. During the height of the case, newspapers were eager for any news, and the suspect's sketches became frequent headlines. But at the same time, this exposure turned the case into a spectacle. Each new drawing generated theories and accusations, but almost never led to concrete progress. This makes us question, were the composite sketches used more as public relations tools than as investigative instruments? One detail that deserves special attention is the similarity between some of the portrayed faces and individuals who were investigated later. In particular, one of the drawings resembles Christian Bruckner, the main suspect years later. However, at the time, he was not on the authorities' radar. Does this mean that the witnesses had already noticed something that went unnoticed? Or are the similarities mere coincidence, reinforced by our tendency to connect dots in hindsight? On the other hand, some suggest that the sketches may have been altered to protect someone. This theory, although controversial, gains strength when we consider witness reports that claim their descriptions were adjusted before being turned into drawings. Why would a witness be discouraged from insisting on certain details? Was there an effort to shape the narrative around suspects who were more convenient for the investigation? Another interesting aspect is how the drawings were received by the public. While some saw them as essential tools, others criticized them for being vague and potentially misleading. This duality reflects the central tension of the case, the search for answers versus the need to present progress, even if superficial. It's this tension that continues to fuel theories and debates to this day. By putting all these pieces together, it becomes clear that the composite sketches of the Madeleine McCann case are more than just drawings. They are reflections of a case marked by uncertainties, conflicts, and external pressures. Every line and shadow of these drawings seems to carry its own story, a story that, to this day, has not been fully told. But here's the question that won't leave my mind. If these sketches were reviewed in light of the technologies and information we have today, could they reveal something that went unnoticed? Or would they just be another example of how the case was shrouded in layers of confusion and mystery? And in the end, the question remains, were the sketches a step toward the truth or just another diversion that took us further away from it? This is the doubt that continues to linger over one of the world's most mysterious cases. The composite sketches in the Madeleine McCann case, which seemed to be tools to advance the investigations, quickly turned into central pieces of an even deeper mystery. And now, by revisiting every drawn line and omitted detail, a new layer of questions begins to emerge. Do these sketches signs of how they were created, and more importantly, in who might have benefited from the confusion they generated? One point that deserves attention is the testimony of one of the people who helped compose one of the most emblematic drawings. She reported seeing a man walking at night, carrying something that seemed to be a child wrapped in a blanket. However, her description was never fully reflected in the released sketch. According to the witness, the man had striking features, a prominent chin, and a slight nose deviation. But when the drawing was presented to the public, the face was generic, almost as if it had been softened to avoid drawing attention. This alteration may seem insignificant, but it raises a troubling question. Why soften details that could have helped in identification? Now pay attention to this. A confidential report leaked years later revealed that some of the released sketches were based on contradictory descriptions. In one case, two witnesses described completely different men, but somehow the features ended up merging into a single drawing. This could have happened by mistake or, as some suggest, by a deliberate decision to create a suspect that fit an already established narrative. And this theory gains strength when we analyze the timing of these sketches, always during periods of high media pressure or when the investigation seemed to be at a dead end. And what about the inconsistencies in the descriptions of one of the most well-known sketches, that of the man observing the site? One witness reported that he had a hunched posture and wore simple clothes, while another stated that he was tall, athletic-looking, and wore a dark hat. These discrepancies wouldn't be uncommon in an investigation, but the problem is that the released sketch seemed to combine both descriptions. This generated even more confusion, with hundreds of reports of suspects who had nothing to do with the case. Were these inconsistencies ignored or deliberately incorporated to broaden the field of possibilities and thus divert attention from other lines of investigation? But what makes it even more intriguing is the involvement of external agencies, such as Scotland Yard, in reviewing these drawings. When the British police took over part of the investigation years later, new sketches were released with significantly different features from the originals. In one of them, the facial features were more defined, suggesting a younger man with specific characteristics, such as subtle scars near the jawline. This led some to question whether the initial versions of the sketches were deliberately imprecise to prevent certain suspects from being identified. And here comes a twist that few know about. In 2013, a witness living near the disappearance site revealed that she had described two distinct men to the police, but only one of them was turned into a drawing. The second man, according to her, had a strange energy and seemed to be disguised with clothes that didn't match the weather at the time. When asked why her second description wasn't used, she received a vague response: "It's not relevant to the current investigation." Why would someone be dismissed so quickly, especially in such a delicate case? Another highlight is the relationship between the sketches and the pressure exerted by the media. Whenever a new drawing was released, it came with sensational headlines that attracted global attention. But instead of generating concrete progress, these actions often resulted in a huge number of false leads. This diverted resources and attention from other investigative lines. Some experts believe that these sketches were used more as a distraction strategy, a way to show progress to the public, while more complex issues remained unanswered. Now let's talk about the direct impact of these actions on the case. A retired investigator revealed that, in the early years of the investigation, reports related to the sketches were handled superficially, with many being filed away without proper verification. He also suggested that some suspects who matched the sketches' descriptions were never formally interrogated. This opens the door to a disturbing possibility. What if the most valuable clues were in the initial testimonies and the forgotten details of these drawings? And there's another layer of mystery. In a recent review conducted by independent analysts, one of the sketches was compared to images of possible suspects who were in the area at the time of the disappearance. A striking resemblance was found with a man who, years later, was identified as Christian Bruckner, currently the main suspect in the case. However, at the time, this connection was not established. This raises an unsettling doubt. Was the man already on the authorities' radar, but his identification was obscured by the inconsistent pieces together? It becomes clear that the sketches are much more than simple investigative tools. They have become a symbol of the complexities and failures that mark the Madeleine McCann case. Every line, every stroke, seems to carry not only the intention to identify, but also the influence of agendas, human errors, and external pressures. And here's the question that won't leave my mind. Were these sketches used to seek the truth or to shape a narrative that kept the case in a zone of ambiguity? What we know is that by revisiting these images in the context in which they were created, we might be closer to understanding not only what happened to Madeleine, but also the mistakes that kept us away from the answers for so long. And as we continue trying to connect the dots, one question echoes. If we had paid more attention to the right features, where would we be today? Given everything we've seen, it's clear that the sketches in the Madeleine McCann case raise more questions than answers. They represent not only an effort to find the truth, but also the mistakes, pressures, and complexities that surrounded the investigation from the start. In my opinion, these drawings were tools that, instead of clarifying, ended up confusing the case. Whether due to lack of precision, decisions to alter or soften details, or even possible agendas that never came to light, what should have been a solid lead became an additional layer of mystery. And personally, I think this reflects a bigger problem. When the focus on the truth is lost and investigations are shaped by haste, pressure, or parallel interests, the victims and their families are the ones most harmed. In Madeleine's case, every wrong decision took us a little further from the answers we so desperately sought. But is there still time to correct this? Could any of these sketches still hold a crucial clue that we overlooked? Now, I want to hear from you. If you've watched this far, comment, I am a guardian of truth. I want to know what you think about the impact of these sketches on the case. And if you have suggestions for other mysteries we should investigate here on the channel, share them in the comments. And before you go, there's a next video you can't miss. In it, we'll talk about another piece of this puzzle that was completely ignored, a piece of evidence that could change the entire perspective of the case. Click now and continue with me in this quest. And of course, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming episodes. Every detail matters, and together, we can get closer to the truth. ***.